Have you ever wondered why Brazilians speak Portuguese and not Spanish?
Even though Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese are a bit different.
Brazil is an island in a sea dominated by Spanish-speaking countries. Same as in Europe, where Portugal is also surrounded by a Spanish-speaking neighbor. So what's the answer to the question? Well, you guessed it.
Colonialism.
But a short answer isn't always the best answer.
You're always very quick, are you, Howard?
In some things, yes. In other things, I like to take my time, if you know what I mean.
Because this is a story of a line that divided the world, of the first European exploration, and repercussions that still shape our world today. So why is this one of my favorite stories about an imaginary line? Why do Brazilians speak Portuguese? How did we get here? The answer can be found on this map. But before we discuss this, first some history. Once upon a time, a Christian coalition waged a long war against an Islamic empire to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula, the Reconquista. Spain and Portugal were two kingdoms that resulted from this war. In the 1400s, Portugal and Spain searched for allies in their fight against their opponents. Portugal hoped to enlist the help of a legendary Christian ruler, Prester John. It was believed he was a lost Christian king that lived somewhere in Africa. And although we know that John never existed, there was an ancient Christian kingdom in Africa, Ethiopia. But that's a story for another time. So the Portuguese, they started to search for this John. They weren't successful, and over time their objective shifted. Now they wanted control over the spice trade. They wanted access to spices such as cloves, cinnamon and pepper that were used for food, medicine and grooming. But there was a problem. Arab traders controlled this trade. They shrouded the origin of these spices in mystery and kept prices high. How high? Well, take cloves for instance. They grew only on the Moluccas and they could be worth their weight in gold. The Portuguese knew these spices were somewhere east in India. That was just a general name for the whole of Asia at the time. They wanted to see if they could sail there. Could they do it? Well, it meant they had to go around Africa, and no one had ever done that. In fact, they weren't even sure if there was a waterway, because some older maps said it wasn't even possible. So while the Portuguese went south and reached the southern tip of Africa, there's an Italian sea captain that says he can cross the Atlantic Ocean to reach India. He says he has the calculations to back it up.
2 + 2 is 4, -1, that's 3, quick maths.
His contemporaries laugh at him and say his math is off, which it was. The Portuguese reject him and his ideas. And then after 7 years of begging, he finally gets a Spanish crown to pay him to set sail to the west. By sheer luck, he comes across some land, and he was sure he reached India. We now know that it was Columbus, and he landed on modern-day Cuba and Haiti, whose inhabitants he proceeds to call Indians, because, well, he arrived in India, remember? When he returns, the Spanish crown is ecstatic. In the same year that they finish the conquest of Granada and complete the Reconquista, they find new ways to reach India. Riches! To claim these lands, they run to the highest authority of the time, the Pope, leader of all Christendom. What really helps is that this supposedly impartial Pope was Spanish.
In a few declarations, he says that the Spanish could claim all the land that they found 100 leagues west of the Portuguese Cape Verde Islands.
Why? Well, because the world is owned by God, and the Pope, as his representative, can give it all away. So, suck it, Portugal. Wait a second, the Portuguese go. This isn't right. You can't just stumble on land and say you own it. What about the people that actually live there? Don't they get a say? That would be very fun, right? But of course that didn't happen. They are butthurt that the declarations seem to give all land in western parts or in the regions of the south and east and of India. It means they actually contradict claims of Portugal and Africa. And the Portuguese, they had spent decades sailing down Africa. They were close to India. And now, all of a sudden, their claims didn't matter anymore? Pope actually even acknowledged that the Spanish were a bit late to the whole discovering a route to India game, when he said that the Spanish had intended to seek out and discover certain islands and mainlands, remote and unknown. But they had been otherwise engaged in the conquest of Granada. And that's just, even in the logic of their time, that discovering land means you own it, It's like laying claim to an invention of a competitor because, well, you had plans to invent it all along. And also India is exactly the prize that the Portuguese are after. They're not gonna let that happen, and their navy is much stronger. So they ignore the Pope and open negotiations with the Spanish. And from this, the Treaty of Tordesillas emerges in 1494. What does this treaty actually say? It draws a line from the North Pole to the south. This was still a line starting west of the Cape Verde Islands. By now it would be 270 leagues. Look at this map. It shows how the Portuguese interpret the agreement. There are three things important to note about this map. The first thing, the treaty says that everything west of that line would be Spanish and east would be Portuguese. But until what point? This wasn't really decided in the agreement. Whoever came first could claim the land. So this meant a rat race for both Spain and Portugal to quickly claim as much land as possible. A second point, as you can see, the new line draws through modern-day Brazil. European explorers actually hadn't visited Brazil yet. The Portuguese arrived around 1500 to claim it. Did the Portuguese know Brazil was there? Historians don't really know. There was a lot of secrecy surrounding maps and new discoveries because it would let competition show the way. So maybe the Portuguese knew? Also, the third thing, what does west of the Cape Verde Islands actually mean? Is it the west of the westernmost part? Is it west from the center? And what kind of league are you using anyway? Different interpretations of where the line starts or what a league is can mean hundreds of kilometers. It's so unclear that historians are still debating where the line actually lies. Also, let's stop for a moment and just admire these two countries. I've always been fascinated by this treaty. It's just two countries deciding to divide the entire world together. It's so ridiculous that it's almost funny. Oh, and also remember that Portugal is a country of 1.5 million people at the time, ready to take over half of the world. It's just insane. Okay, with this out of the way, what happens next? Well, the Portuguese continue to expand to India. They find a way. They eventually even make it to the Spice Islands. That was their ultimate goal. The Spanish continue to colonize South America and murder millions of people by design and also by accident with the introduction of their germs. They get lucky because they find silver and a load of it at that. But there is a problem with all this good old
colonialism.
Because what about the other side of the line? Where does the line actually end? This becomes a problem when the Portuguese claim the Moluccas, the Spice Islands, and the Spanish, they claim the Philippines when an expedition comes there in 1521. It leads to another struggle and another fight. So they go back to the Pope and eventually they decide on another line, the anti-meridian. So now the Earth is neatly divided in two spheres of influence. They are not really super strict in enforcing it, because the Philippines, which is actually on the wrong side of the line, go to Spain, and the Portuguese, they are allowed to expand Brazil, also past the line. By now you may ask, what are the other European countries actually doing with these claims? Well, they kindly ignore them, and Dutch, French, English and Danes all settle in the spheres of influence claimed by our two kingdoms. Some historians say that the rat race with Spain meant imperial overstretch for Portugal. As a small kingdom, they couldn't really defend their entire empire. And their biggest prize, the Spice Islands, well, when the Dutch entered the scene, they easily displaced the Portuguese. And even though this treaty is not really enforced by Spain or Portugal, it still leaves a mark in our day. For instance, in the fact that there are 20 times more Portuguese-speaking people in Brazil than there are in Portugal, or that people in the Philippines speak Spanish. And also in modern times, the treaty is invoked. Argentina used it to show how they had the right to the Falklands, and Chile thought it was a great idea to show they could claim a part of Antarctica. To me, this is the most fascinating. A treaty, which is basically just a written agreement between two countries that is more than 500 years old, becomes a legitimate basis for arguments about who owns what. It shows how age-old events still impact us today. And if you want to know how a diplomatic mission from 400 years ago still influences what kind of shoes you put on your feet, be sure to watch this next video.